You are listening to iRadio TT, online all the time.
Welcome to Music Matters, the Caribbean edition. The podcast series featuring news, interviews and analysis of all the music from the islands.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Music Matters,
the Caribbean edition. I am Laura Dowridge Phillips.
And I am Nigel Campbell, and once again, we're talking about the business of music here in the Caribbean.
Yes, we are. We are back again, guys.
Once again.
Looking at all the things happening in the region. It's been an exciting few months, Nigel.
Quite
a lot
so.
of activity, a lot of albums dropping.
Yeah, and at the same time as albums dropping and things, there's been a little bit of controversy also. But that's all good because that controversy put Caribbean music in the headlines here, there, and everywhere.
Which controversy are you referring to? Are you referring to Soca winning the Grammy for Best Reggae Album?
I don't necessarily think their win was a controversy, but I think the controversy was a reaction, certainly from Jamaicans, right? And I think that made some headlines, certainly here in the Caribbean. And there were
around the world. Around the world.
There you go. And there was commentary by stakeholders and persons advocating for and against the whole idea of let's call it as it is, a white band from the States winning a reggae album of the year. But that said, I think one of the things that stuck with me, I think, is Carolyn Cooper, who's she teaches at the university, Jamaican. So we know Jamaicans don't own reggae. And it's a kind of a similar sentiment that we expressed in our very first podcast, that soca music is Caribbean. Once you let it out of the bag, that's it. You can't put it back. It's like toothpaste. Once it comes out, you can't put it back in.
Yes.
Right?
And so just win kind of plays into everything that we've been talking about since we started this podcast, the whole thing about data and numbers and marketing and it all plays in. So yes, they are a white band and they pay homage to Jamaicans and they acknowledge the roots of this art form that they have embraced. But at the end of the day, they have the numbers and they sell the albums. And even though we may not have heard about them before, they do obviously have a following.
Yeah, they do. I mean, Soldiers of Jah Army, if I got the acronym correct. But I think, as you rightly said, and again, when we had this discussion with Casey Phillips and Marlon Fuentes, who worked at the Recording Academy, about the idea of this guy, wasn't so much global. We spoke about global performance, but certainly in terms of reggae album, reggae is open to everybody. But what is important is, one, who voted. And
exactly.
I don't know how many Jamaicans are in the Recording Academy to vote, let's say, just for national kind of stuff. But if they had a lot of people who were interested and heard their music, who are general voters, guess what? They will get the votes and they will win.
Yeah.
And that's what's happened. So as I said, that was one of the things that was stuck with me. The other thing that, of course, stuck with me was the final release of Shensia's album, which had been
the long-awaited, most anticipated album.
Bubbling for quite some time. I have an opinion about it. I mean, the album was nice to listen to, but I have an opinion in terms of the kind of effective rollout of the album, right? Because I ain't gonna lie to you, Shensia had, to me, everything that is needed to kind of break crossover.
Yes.
And certainly for a female artist, right? No disrespect to Coffee or to Spice or anybody else who has put out records recently, or Etana, who actually was nominated for a Grammy and thing. But I think that Shensia has, certainly for the American market, everything that people look for: the looks, the skill, the production team behind her, of course, a little label of support and that kind of thing. But I so far, and it's not very long, but so far I haven't seen the kind of number rollout that I would have expected.
You know what disappointed me? There are no memorable tracks in the album.
Yeah.
The Shensia has given us so many memorable songs. Shenyang Anthem, Rebel. Like she's given us so many that just, hardcore dancehall chanting. And this album, I expected the album to be more of that.
Well, I know that
it really wasn't, and that caused, there was a lot of criticism from Jamaicans about her not doing. It seemed like such a drastic departure from what she's known for. Mm-hmm. Even when she went on Hot 97 and she did that freestyle and impressed everybody. Mm-hmm. I expected more of that. Even if he was going to do, even if she was going more into like a hip hop vein to do that kind of freestyle rap kind of thing, I expected more of that. And people were hardcore fans of hers were disappointed. And a lot of people in the industry found it was such a drastic departure from what she became famous for. And I understand that she doesn't want to limit herself to any one genre, that she wants to be a global artist. I get that. But I feel like she could have weaned her way into it. You know?
At the end of the day, I think the other thing that you also look at is basically, are the songs great songs? And I think she had about 4 tracks certainly over the last year that had been released before the album dropped. A couple of them were actually on the album. I know she featured on a Kanye West last album, but to me, they weren't great songs. That's at the end of the day, that was just what it was.
There were no memorable tracks.
Yeah, and I understand that everybody, of course, that would to get into the American market, to try to, to tweak the sound and the look and that kind of stuff to find this kind of supposed market. But I didn't see those numbers come out in terms of the uptake, but we'll see what happens. And I think she did mention that she's planning her next album already.
Yeah, she's working on a second album. And I listened to an interview she did. I can't remember. I think it was an Angela Yee's lip service, and she said, she's a hard worker and she's not afraid to keep doing it until she strikes gold. She will keep plugging until she strikes gold. I mean, she's ambitious. Her team has done a wonderful job steering her to this point, and I think she will be successful if she just has to find the right formula.
Yeah. Do you think she needs a new producer or new producers? Because I know one record never has a producer. Them days long gone. Because I just think, as I said, what was put out there was good, but it wasn't great. And I think what has to happen is you have to be great. But we'll see what happens.
We'll see what happens
in time.
And on the home front, we have Machel Montano celebrating a milestone 40 years in music, and he ain't 50 yet. He ain't 50 yet. Machel took the last 2 years. The pandemic afforded him the opportunity to take a much needed break. Some people thought he went into retirement, but he never did. He just took a break. He got married. He was enjoying married life. He took some time off. And now he's back. He effectively made his return at his maiden destinations at the venture he did with Tribe Carnival.
I love that
in
idea.
Cancun.
In Cancun, Mexico. I love that idea.
Cancun, Mexico. He did 2 shows, one showcasing the first 20 years of his career, the second one showcasing the last 20 years of his career. So it's safe to say Machel is back. 40 years. The 40-year journey celebration has begun, and I'm looking forward to see what he's going to roll out over the next year.
And his talent hasn't diminished. I mean, when he had released his wedding album in 2020, I was able to just send some questions, and he actually narrated the answers to me. So it's almost like an interview, a virtual interview with Machel. And one of the questions I did ask him was, "Is that the end of his album making?" Because I was one of those persons who thought, well, this was it. After the wedding album, he's retiring. No such luck. And he laughed at the question. He said, "You can't be serious." He said, "Give up? I will never give up now. Maybe a little bit here, maybe a little bit there, but no way I'm giving up." So kudos to him, much, because his talent hasn't waned. He still has a level of skill, talent, and performance aesthetic that is still way above a number of artists, younger artists, a whole generation younger than him. And he's the kind of, that's who you have to look for. That's who you have to look to. And as a bar to hurdle over, get there or get gone, because this music industry is they take no prisoners, right? The music industry is not what it was many years ago, where you could have gotten away with a failing album, but you have an opportunity because the label supporting it to have a second album and a third album. As I said, those days are gone. And the whole music industry has changed, as you know, right? So that with all these kind of things, we're looking at the kind of Shenseea album rollout, good or bad. That's an opinion that we have. Machel's continuing career and the fact that he is at a level that a number of local artists haven't done at, as well as the kind of idea of what reggae is to, let's say, a voting audience in the Recording Academy, and let's assume they're all Americans. It kind of tells us that we have a lot of work to do, right? Yeah,
we do. And I'm very hopeful that we can get Machel on our podcast this year, to talk about his journey and to talk about coming from being too young to soca to being the king of soca.
And to tell you how old I am, I was in the savannah when he sang Too Young to Soca. That was
Nigel,
amazing.
Nigel, you are ancient.
Deal with it now, Afni. And just love me. What I tell you?
So what do we have lined up for our listeners today?
Today, well, as I said, we're talking about the kind of music business, the business of music, certainly here in the Caribbean, but critically the business of music, business of Caribbean music getting global acceptance. And let's deal with the United States of America. And today we have, or tonight or whatever time it is, we have an interview that we did with Nolan Baynes, who's the general manager of 300 Studios, which is a subsidiary of 300 Entertainment, that entertainment conglomerate that is created by Kevin Little, one of those innovators, pioneers who took Def Jam recordings global as it was, and a seriously important person within the music industry. But Noah, of course, he's Caribbean, Guyanese heritage and that kind of stuff. And as a consequence, he has a certain interest in getting Caribbean music into the American market. And Laura and I had an interview with Nolan, and it's one of the best interviews we had in quite some time. And our listeners, trust me, this is an important interview that I think all our listeners, including stakeholders, should take a listen to. So,
yes,
Laura, everybody else, Nolan Baynes.
So we are speaking to Mr. Nolan Baynes. He is the general manager of 300 Studio. Baynes is of Guyanese descent, and he has worked extensively across the American media industry in the areas of marketing. And he's worked with companies such as MTV, and we are very, very pleased to have him on our podcast tonight.
Welcome, Nolan.
On our podcast. Welcome, Nolan.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Okay, Laura, talk to us.
So Nolan, tell us first, before we delve into some of the meatier things we want to talk about, explain to us what is 300 Studio and what do you do?
Okay, so for your audience, 300 is a record company, right? And it was an independent label that was started by the officers that owned and operated Def Jam. And so they wanted to, Def Jam had gone through a series of acquisitions, and those guys left and went to Warner Music Group and took Warner IPO, right? And Kevin Liles and Leo Cohen and Todd Moskowitz and a few other people decided that it was time to start a new independent label with a different mindset that was more updated, right? Like they really cared about the DIY. They cared about sort of creating entrepreneurs. They felt like the music business was a little heavy-handed, skewing towards sort of that major label thing. And they were like, there are more entrepreneurs in the space. How do we grow that? How do we create a platform that can help, an artist go from, sort of relying and just being an artist signed to somebody else to being a business person? And they formed 300, and that was about 8 years ago. And the company has grown. Like they were dead on. They were smart. They had their fingers on the pulse, and they made some shrewd business moves. And the company, was able to sign a bunch of sort of new generation trendsetters and artists like the Migos and Megan Thee Stallion, Young Thug and Gunna, and just tons and tons of artists. And they recently signed a deal with Warner Music Group. It's been reported a $400 million deal to acquire Warner. Warner acquire them. And so 300. I tell you that to kind of give you the foundation, but 300 Studios is an extension that Kevin Liles wanted to form, because as he's looking at the music industry, they're constantly thinking about what are the verticals that we need to incorporate to make sure that our business is viable. And film and TV and long form content production, even short form content production, was an area that they wanted to focus on. And so during the pandemic, Kevin decided that it was the right time to kind of do it. And he reached out to a colleague of mine, Kelly G, who was a programmer at BET. Kelly reached out to me. We had a series of meetings with Kevin about how we would structure it, how we would do it. And we're a year and a half old right now. And it's still early days. We're building the plane and flying the plane and fueling the plane and feeding the passengers and everything all at once. But we're off to a pretty good start. I'm the general manager, so I focus heavily on business strategy. And it's all hands on deck, really. So I do a lot of creative stuff as well. But we just launched our first project with Netflix called Race, which was a story about Bubba Wallace, who is a Black NASCAR driver. That's up on Netflix right now. And we have a few other shows that's in development, right? We haven't even done our full-fledged road show as yet. Like, we're still sort of building out some really cool ideas and cool stories. And now with Warner being our partner, there's tons more opportunity to do a lot more things. And, and obviously being a Caribbean enthusiast, a Caribbean culture enthusiast, I'm like, how do we tell Caribbean stories? And so,
there you go.
There's a great opportunity, right, to kind of just dive in and do some really cool stuff. So yeah, that's kind of what 300 Studios is.
Laura, go ahead.
Where you going, Nigel?
Oh, well, okay.
That's so polite.
Yeah, we try to think. But I do have to say, what caught my ear was Caribbean, because as I said, our show focuses on Caribbean, the business of music, and certainly on the Caribbean aspect of it. And we here, and Laura and I will admit, we met you first on a call, on a Zoom call for another group that we are part of called Odos, the Odos group with Simon Batiste.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
And we heard your commentary, and we got that you understand the perspective of what a Caribbean artist needs to do to break into the United States market. And that's something we want to explore here. So effectively, just tell us, what's happening and what's not happening. And I have this perception that Caribbean people are invisible, unfortunately, maybe my glasses or something like that. So that what does a Caribbean artist, and that is a non-Puerto Rican or the non-DR artist, what do we have to do? Because yes, dancehall is there. We're from Trinidad and Tobago. Soca is a hot genre here. The numbers are not like tenfold. So dancehall is like tenfold of soca, and reggaeton is tenfold of dancehall. Sure. What else do we have to do to have a space within that American music market? Are we doing something right? Are we doing something wrong? Just let us know so we could have a conversation.
It's an interesting question, and I love the term that you use, the invisibility of our artists. I think that's a great way to kind of put it. I believe, though, that we are very visible in one aspect, and then, to your point, very invisible on another aspect, right? So first, let's start with where we do a good job. We do a good job of having or being the fuel behind such an infectious cultural genre. Right, reggae, dancehall, soca. It's very infectious. It's infectious music, right? Like, I was talking with another partner of mine, and we were talking about how once you experience our music, you get a taste of what our culture is and what our lore is. And as a people, it almost takes you back to Africa in a way. It takes you back to the roots in a way. And so, if I'm telling the truth, we haven't lost any of that power. Our culture, our music, we haven't lost it, right? So that part of it, I think when people think about us in America, they instantly come up with these sort of cultural, they could identify these cultural elements that is uniquely us, right? You guys, your carnivals are amazing. Well, we love the way y'all whine, the music, the rhythms, the drums, they know all that stuff. But then what happens is because we do a terrible job, this is the part that I think we could do a better job of. We do a terrible job of retaining and educating and creating a system where people can, if they love it, they can dive into it and understand what's underneath the surface. We're sort of losing a whole generation of quote unquote outsiders that are not Caribbean folks. We're losing them because they don't understand how profound our culture really is. Hence, there's no need to really attach to it emotionally, right? So that's the invisibility part of it, right? And I don't think we do ourselves justice by taking a surface approach when it comes to our culture, the way we write songs, the way we're producing songs, where we're lazy with our music to a certain extent, right? And again, this is a very general statement. So I'm not saying every artist is that. I think we have tons of artists that could be global ambassadors for our culture and our music and have the potential to, be pop artists and pop icons. And that's a whole nother conversation about why that's not happening. But I think part of, as a people, where we can improve and be better is essentially painting this picture and educating people on why our music is so visceral, And when you hear it, you're like, you can't help but to react a certain way, right? It's like, it's like going to New Orleans and hearing second line. And when you hear second line music, you're like, it's something about it. You're like, what is happening to me right now, right? Jazz, to a certain degree, have the same thing. You hear good jazz and you're like, wow, like it messes with your mood and it puts you in this thing. Caribbean music, we have it. We so have it. It's such a huge appealing part of it. But I think we don't do the rest of the work, right? We don't have any mechanisms in place to do the rest of the work to explain to people just why this music is so powerful.
What would drive that education thing? Media? The artists themselves?
Before he answers, I'm thinking, I get the impression that that's where the storytelling comes in. But for the storytellers, we also face a similar barrier to the artists, the musicians, in that we who sit in the Caribbean have to convince the world that these are stories that they need to know, that they need. So the example, as a writer based in the Caribbean, I have to convince a publication that this is a story that that you all need to know, right? That is usually, it's sometimes pretty difficult. So it's the same thing with the music. Like, there are barriers because people will say, well, there isn't much interest, and we know writers in America who talk to us, who we have had on the podcast, who spoke to us about their difficulty sometimes pitching those types of stories to their editors, because they have to make it relatable. They have to understand why it's important to tell these stories.
Sure. Yeah, you're right. I mean, there are barriers. I think any culture that is not a dominant culture that has the desire to be consumed and be part of the general conversation is going to have barriers, right? I don't think the barriers are insurmountable, though. And I think no time than now are we equipped to break those barriers down. And here's why I say that. First, on the music side, I think there is a demand for our music, right? But I don't know if the supply is meeting the demand, the quality of the supply, right? And I hate to just say, here's the problem, right? I think there's a couple of issues, right? I think we create music, or the majority of us create music, from a place of survival, right? I'm putting myself in the mind of the artist that's at the studio trying to create and trying to write the next song. And they're bombarded with this notion of like, boy, this is my livelihood. I have to make something happen. If I don't make something happen, I'm not going to eat, right? And so you fall into the trap of looking at what everybody else is doing, like what's working. Oh, they saying this about women. All right, so I'm gonna have to say that. But not only do I have to say it, I have to one up them, right? Yeah. And so it becomes this terrible cycle of just nonsense to a certain degree. Now, the artists that I believe have the most opportunity to kind of grow and propel and promote the culture, I believe, are probably the ones with more foundational components in place, right? Like maybe it's the more successful artists that don't necessarily have to worry about money and feeding the family because they have a growing business and all that stuff, right? But there's no mechanism in place to let the young ones figure that out, right? So you could create from a place of just art. I just need to create art. I need to talk about what's happening amongst my people, the mindset. What are people talking about? Can I creatively put those subject matters in songs and help capture the hearts and minds, right? So that part of it is not happening. And I think, and I just don't want to blame it on economics. I have to say that it's also the notion, and American artists are falling into this trap too. A big percentage of young American artists, especially within the hip hop field or whatever, we're blinded by the wrong thing, right? We're thinking 10 steps ahead. Boy, when I get this contract, I'm going to be driving this big car and blah, 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 blah. And it's really they're motivated by how much money they could make or what they perceive to be the payoff of being successful within the music industry. And everyone will tell you that we know that 90% of the imagery and the symbolism that is shown in these hip hop videos and these videos of artists that are uber successful is not, they don't own those things. Or neither do they care to own those things, probably, right? It's a handful of artists that are so successful that you're like, oh, they are living that lifestyle, right? I would say 90% of Right. Don't. They're working class people. Like they just happen to be working in music. And if something happens like a pandemic and they can't tour, they're back in the same place that, you know what I mean? Like it's happening every day. But now we have a whole generation of kids who do not care to decipher that message. It's an aspirational message. So they're constantly trying to get there. And so there's shortcuts being taken, right? Like I'm just going to write what I hear. I think if I go to YouTube and I upload a song, it's fine. I'm not listening to that song over. I'm not getting it remixed. I'm not having a real writer look at it. There's none of that happening. It's just produce and put it online
and hope for the best. Right. One of the things I'm thinking of, though, as you say this, I just want to give two examples. One is Umi from Jamaica, who had a remix of his song that went to number 1, Cheerleader, and Kevin Little from St. Vincent, who went to number 4 with Turn Me On, and effectively had the same song that we heard in Trinidad. There wasn't much of a remix. What worked for those two that doesn't work for anybody else? Was it the label? Was it the studio? What the studio? Was it the label? Was it the artist? What did the public see in Kevin Little that they never saw in Machel Montano, as an example? If you can do that kind of analysis.
Right. First of all, I love those two songs, and I was really like celebrating when those records were climbing up the charts, and and I had actual tangible examples that I could show in those pitch meetings, Laura, when they would be like, why are you trying to get this video played or book this artist, right? I could be like, look at Kevin Little's record, it works. So I think Kevin Little was slightly different from the Umi record. It's like Kevin Little's record, if you listen to it, had pop sensibility. You understood what he was saying. The melodies were simple and easy. The rhythm was undeniable, right? It wasn't difficult to kind of fall into the allure of that rhythm. But what he was saying was understandable. It was a pop song. So it was simple, right? Like the melodies to me kind of carried it. And if you look at the format of a pop record, I felt like it carried it. Strong hook. The verses weren't too complicated. You had a bridge, and then you had a hook that was repetitive, and I could understand it, right? So it was a perfect summer record. I think also the timing was right for it, in that in America, there's this pattern of like when you program certain types of songs on radio. And radio was still, and back then was even a bigger platform for amplifying and growing the popularity of a record, right? Today, radio might have taken a hit a little bit, but it's still the biggest amplification platform that there is, right? So that record was perfect. And the timing was right because they were always looking for that 1 or 2 records during the summer season that could pop off, right? It got there. And then, so you had the makings of a really cool, easy to digest record, fun, loving record, right? Summertime is coming on, perfect time. And then you couple that with Atlantic Records, right? And then I think, because I want to say Kevin Little went through VP that had
VP. With Atlantic, yes.
Atlantic. Right. So when Atlantic radio team got a hold of that record, they were able to put the resources and the time to get that record added around the country. And so you're increasing audience more and more and more. Of course, they focused on the New Yorks, Miami, DC, places where Caribbean people were. But then once you got those major markets, I think you increase your audience. New York alone, listening audience is like 7-point-something million people, right? Now that's one market. And then you multiply that. So if you hit 100 million people in America that's hearing that record over and over again, it's a pop record, right? Most of our records never make it that way, right? So it was perfect timing, perfect creative record. The season was perfect for it. And I remember doing a thing on TRL, right? Around the time that record came out, we had launched Tempo, or we were about to launch Tempo. So we were building up the pre-hyping the notion of a Caribbean channel. And we had Kevin Little on TRL.
Yes, I remember that.
Right? And now we bought all these flags and give it to the audience, a bunch of white kids in the audience, and they're waving up the flags. And it was that experiential element of the music that captured the programming team as well. And once they saw the flags and saw how it looked and the colorfulness of it, and then you have Atlantic pushing it, now there is a reason why this record should make it. And by the way, that same formula worked for Sean Paul, right? Down to Atlantic Records being the label that was behind him at that time. Now, the Umi record, similar, but you had the secret sauce to me for the Umi record was the
Felix John.
Say it again.
Felix John, the producer, the remixer.
Yes, but wasn't Salam Remy was actually a part of that?
You're correct. Yes,
right?
You're correct. I apologize.
Salam is one of the few, to me. First of all, genius. I think Salam is we should be giving Salam his flowers in the Caribbean, because he's one of those producers that understand music on a very high level, how to put together pop songs and how to write great songs and how to work with great creatives. But he understands the sensibility of our culture and how to make it digestible. Hence, the stuff he did with the food.
Trinidad heritage. And he did come, our music company brought him here.
Right. And also just to look at the pattern, right? So you have the creative part is taken care of. You have Salam Remy. It's a remix. It's a great record, pop record, whatever. And then I believe that record went through Sony. So now here you have another major label with access to radio. And I think the timing as well. I want to say I might be lying, but I want to say it came out around the same around summer.
Yes, it was a summer song. Yes.
And
it's a big summer song.
Yeah.
So one key thing I hear you saying, having a label, being signed to a label is an important aspect.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying having the support
of a label.
Right. Okay. So you don't have to necessarily be signed, because there's also things that you can do. Like I remember working a record that got the same kind of love, right? We did this Capleton record called Tour back in the days, and Capleton wasn't signed to us, and we didn't have a big radio staff. So what we did was we had a budget to hire independents, and we had a strategy of when to roll out certain things or whatever. And we were able to break a record. So, and especially in this day and age, you don't really need to be signed to a label, but you do need access to the things that labels have.
Right. Yeah. So how do Caribbean artists get themselves noticed by, someone who could then give them that support? Because I know you're right. A lot of artists in the Caribbean aren't necessarily looking to be signed, and everybody's looking for distribution deals. More or less, everybody wants to have some sort of independence when it comes to their art, but they would definitely love the support of, a label to get their music out there. Yeah.
So I would say that part of the brass tacks is you need businesses. You need viable music. You need to be a viable artist. I have to be able to look at all the platforms that generates revenue for a label and see that your record is working and you have the audience in order for me as a label to say, yes, I want to take on, a business relationship with that particular artist. Unfortunately, a lot of us don't see it that way, right? And part of it is the old school way that the record industry was ran in the Caribbean. And I don't know how old you guys are, but I'm pretty old. And back in the day, you guys look like a bunch of young folk. Right? But getting into the industry, back in the days, I remember there was this dynamic of like the manager and the label owned everything, and the artist was just like almost like a throwaway commodity. Right. That once I have a rhythm, and the rhythm really is the power, and the producer that created the rhythm is really the powerful part of the formula. The artist comes in and out. And so there was this thinking of like, somebody's going to do it for me. My manager is going to do it. My producer is going to do it. The label is going to do it. And I don't think we evolved fast enough to understand that the business is not that anymore. No one is showing up at your door making you a star. It doesn't work that way. Right. Yeah. And I don't think that. Maybe it's starting to shift now, but that consciousness wasn't there up to a few years ago.
It is starting to shift slowly. I find it's happening more among artists who aren't considered mainstream in the Caribbean. So outside of the reggae and soca, you have artists who do other types of music. We have a lot of artists who do pop and rock and neo soul. And they find that with them, because their music is so marginalized, in the Caribbean, yeah, that they function more like that. They function as a business, and they make sure that they're on all the platforms, and they're the ones quicker to seek out licensing deals and syncing deals. And so they seem to be more business oriented, because for them it's not a hustle. Right. Because they can't get that instant, they can't just have one big hit and make a ton of money. Right. Like say a soca artist.
More deliberate about how
way more deliberate and way more strategic.
Right. So
but they're not the ones that you will hear on radio here in the Caribbean. They're not the ones that everybody knows about in the Caribbean.
Right. So it's almost like they gotta come to America, break, and then come back, and right. It's this whole crazy cycle, right? Like I had a conversation recently with Bungie Garland, since you guys are Trini, and you'll appreciate this. Like I was talking to Bungie, and I was telling him that I'm trying to put together this initiative where I can create these case studies to show A&Rs and show platforms that that our music is viable. And we were talking about kind of what he was doing. And I was really impressed because him and his team and his wife, Fayanne, and all of them, they think like these local independent hip hop artists that's utilizing the system. And I thought that was brilliant. But then I'm talking to him and then I'm like, well, where are you? And he was like, oh, I'm in New York. And he was spending I guess he had like a little residency in New York. Yeah. That's part of the struggle, is that the exchange of ideas aren't happening with the kids that are actually doing it with our Caribbean folks, because you have to travel. There's a barrier of entry, right? And people like Bungie, obviously, that's not a barrier for them, right? So, but it was interesting to hear Bungie talk about their next strategy and utilizing DSPs and all that. It was beautiful.
Yeah, so I just wanted, as a follow-up to what you were saying, Nolan, I just wanted to find out, because I know, as you were saying, there are a lot of people who have the ability to travel. There are a lot of barriers, facing a lot of Caribbean artists. What can we do here in the Caribbean that might help our cause? So we had the issue recently of, Soca winning Best Reggae Grammy, and Jamaicans were up in arms about it. And there was a suggestion from a Jamaican organization that, Jamaicans support their own award ceremony where they award people. And the idea of the Caribbean having its own music awards has been floated many times by many people. Some of those initiatives, would those kinds of things work to help position us more mainstream, that, give us the kind of publicity we're looking for?
Absolutely. That's a good question too. Or a good statement. Yes, absolutely. I think part of it is I can't expect other people to be interested in my backyard if my backyard is not tended to, right? If I don't have the right setup, you come in, my grass is green, I have birds flying around, the trees are well groomed, and all of that, right? And also to give them something different that might be more appealing to them. If that's not there, I can't expect people to be like, oh, just off the love of humanity, I'm going to support you. It doesn't work that way, right? So part of our issue is we do not have an infrastructure that is set up to be a viable business, right? When I walk into 300 and I'm constantly pushing, Caribbean ideas and Caribbean artists and all this stuff. And I have a few other people within the company, this guy, D Sonoram, who's brilliant and has a Caribbean heritage as well. D is one of the heads of promotions and radio. And he's working all these big time pop records and all this stuff. And we have the same passion. We're yo, we would love for Caribbean music to break out. But we run into an issue where it's only a small amount of artists that's doing it on such a scale that an American company would pay attention to it, right? Because it's about dollars and cents, right?
It's a business.
Right. It's a straight up business. And what they don't realize is that, or what people from the outside looking in doesn't realize, is it is more and more judged on the viability, your ability to generate revenue than anything else. This notion of you feel the music and feel the culture, that is so not the reality, right? When you look at what a typical A&R meeting looks like, when people are listening to music and here's who we sign next and here's who we're going after, a lot of that stuff is based on numbers. Look at the latest TikTok trend. Look at the artist song that's blowing up on TikTok. Oh, by the way, there's these YouTube viral videos that's popping off. Just got the charts from Spotify, and here's the independent stuff. Here's who's making, right? Because you could look at all those numbers and equate that to a dollar amount, right? Every stream is worth 0.007 cents or whatever, right? So now I have a reason to quantify what I think you're worth, right? And we're nowhere, we're not even set up to speak the same language, right? So we're constantly waiting on that notion of oh boy, they just gonna wake up one day and realize just how beautiful we are, right? It's not it's not happening. So what I was talking to Bungie Garland about was this idea that, and it wasn't just Bungie, it's like I was speaking to Morgan Heritage about it and a few other artists that I felt have some level of crossover ability, right? Like, I'm like, I have to put together these case studies to show them that when you work a record correctly, the right record from the right artist correctly, here's the numbers, right? And then I don't expect you to throw money against that. I expect you to give me a shot to utilize the resources that we have. Can I utilize our independent distribution company that's talking to all the DSPs every single day? Can I run an artist through that, show you that there's money to be made, and then be able to say, all right, now we should go after these artists because we have a mechanism in which to talk to their fans, right? And also maybe cross them over so they could become bigger business. We're not doing that by ourselves. Hip hop is doing that by themselves. These kids are doing that. When they show up and when there's a bidding war for an artist, it's because they have millions and millions and millions of streams on a record because they figured out how to work that system. We're brilliant people. I don't understand why we don't understand that that's how the music industry is running right now. Like, we got to get into that space. Nobody's coming to save us. Right?
So does on that topic of the DSPs, does the categorization of the music matter? So we have an issue now in the Caribbean where everything is labeled reggae. Soca artists label their music reggae because it's the most recognized category. They figure there isn't a category for them for soca anyway. It's not, nobody, it's under world music or whatever, nobody will take it on, so everybody labels it reggae. Dancehall is having this conversation, why are we being called reggae? We are dancehall. We should have our own categorization. So does the categorization matter?
Yes, it does. I think it does. I think part of the problem is that we are not strategically set up to take advantage of any level of categorization, right? But I don't know if that's the right term. I may have made up a word.
We both did. That's okay.
Yeah, that's okay.
we made it a word. It's legit. That's
good.
Now.
Yeah, it's on this podcast.
So from the programmer point of view, right? And the programmers are making up these categories. It's not us, right? So the programmer, let's say at Pandora, is going, how can I best service the people that are listening to the platform? The people know that reggae, they understand the Bob Marley syndrome, and they know anything that sounds like it is probably reggae. I'm just going to put it on there. So there's a little bit of laziness on the programming side, right? But they're only doing that because part of it is based on numbers. I'm only going to play a record if the audience that's listening to my platform want to hear it, right? I'm not going to just risk it because I'm going to lose audience. And I'm in the business of just attracting people and keeping them on the platform. So what they're going to do is they're going to come up with programming strategies to put the most amount of ears and eyeballs on a particular category or a particular playlist, right? So that's where that sort of, let's just put everything in a pot because it sounds similar. Let's just keep it moving. I don't have time to break it down because the more I break it down, the more I'm siphoning off numbers of people. It's becoming more and more niche, right? So we have a dilemma, a philosophical one, right? Do we want to keep our music completely pure and market that to the public, or do we want to meet the public where the public is? Right.
We also have another dilemma in that, okay, so reggae is year round, dancehall year round. Soca is predominant throughout the region under different, subgenres of soca, but they're all basically tied to carnivals throughout the region. So there's a tracking site called Soca Source that looks at the number of listeners and it tracks, the streams and stuff. And what that site has found, I had a conversation with the people behind the site earlier to say, during Carnival, streams of soca skyrockets.
Yeah.
Once Carnival is done,
zero.
That's it.
Right.
So how do we then? So the challenge is how to maintain that interest in the genre throughout. Do
we create brand new music after Carnival? And I mean, for an audience, not necessarily a Carnival masqueraders, but for an audience. Because that's the question I've always asked. So Ash Wednesday comes, give me a new song at least now. What's happening? Yeah. What happens?
So part of the problem again is laziness to me, right? Laziness in how we look at the whole system, right? So because it's always worked that way, I can make a tremendous amount of money during this period of time. So that means my infrastructure will only focus on that period of time. Now, if I have to make music outside of Carnival season, right now I'm stretched as an artist. I have to think about how do I get the hearts and the minds of the public non-Carnival time, right? Because if it's Carnival time, I know it's happy music, it's celebration. I know the formula for making those types of records, right? When I remember one time, I don't know if Marshall will remember this, but when we were forming Tempo at MTV all those years ago, Marshall was one of the ambassadors that we wanted to work with, right? We were like, yo, there's a few artists that if we can break them, it will help the case for Tempo. And I remember Marshall talking about carnival music, and he said, we were in the studio with Wyclef, and Clef was like kind of thinking about working on some music with him and how do we make it more mainstream? This same conversation that we're having, non-carnival music. And he said something to me that really put it all in perspective. He said, yeah, making the soca thing, the dance carnival thing, I could do that in my sleep. Right. And then I thought about that and I was like, and here you are right now going through what every artist go through to figure out what's my next hit record, because that's how the rest of the world thinks. It's not just about one season. So for soca, I think that's probably one of the toughest challenges is to get the mindset out of just carnival. Carnival is great and it gives you a great pulse, but then you have to create pulses after that. And the only way to do that now is that you have to get into what people are doing when they get back to their regular lives. How do you stay relevant during those times? You know,
you brought up a name just now, the Tempo, MTV Tempo. And as I said, you also use the phrase case studies. I want to throw a couple of case studies at you. One, of course, is MTV Tempo. I know Frederick Morton, I could call his name. He had spoke to me about Tempo, and I understand he now basically has taken back the brand, if you correct me on this one. But I'm keen to understand what worked and what did not work at Tempo. And the other case study is about Shensia, but let's first talk about Tempo, because you talk about infrastructure, and part of the infrastructure, I think, is having a streaming platform or a video platform as it was. And MTV Tempo made a lot of sense. I was very happy when it came on. I remember come dig it if that's Marshall was at Delicious Vinyl, if I remember. And I said, hey, this is what we're supposed to be doing now. And well, it didn't work all the way through. Can you tell me what happened or what didn't happen at Tempo? Is that possible?
Well, I could only tell you from my perspective. And so in the early days of Tempo, I think we started putting together that plan from a pure place, right? A place of, we need this. We're passionate about it. We feel like our music is viable. We feel like there's a demand for it. And it was a perfect storm happening at that time. Major labels were paying attention to the latest crop. VP was at its height in terms of putting out the types of projects that they were putting out. And MTV had just technologically had just launched these verticals called digital channels, right? This is when we figured out the bandwidth, the digital bandwidth was much greater than a regular terrestrial sort of
satellite thing.
System, right? And going through the regular traditional way was really expensive, right? Because you needed like $10 million for transponder space, all this craziness. And so MTV was really about how do we create these sort of niches, subgenres, right? Like how do we do a rap channel that's only about rap? How do we do a rock channel that's only about rock? Because if you think about what MTV was, they're an advertising platform. That's all it is. We bring audience in, we sell ads against them. That's how we make a load of money, right? Yeah. So now it was our job to kind of show MTV that, yo, you're missing a segment that we believe is also viable to the ad community. And there was a bunch of different things happening. I think at one point I was working with RETV, and I wanted to bring RE in as a digital channel, right? And it was easy because I was just going to import dancehall. It was just going to be a dancehall thing. And then David Levy introduced me to Frederick Morton. And Frederick and I was like, Frederick had a bigger vision. He was like, yo, I think it could be a lifestyle channel. And so I kind of abandoned the dancehall thing because his vision made a lot of sense. I was like, you know, you're absolutely right. Like I'm thinking too niche. Like if we could do lifestyle, then
everything Caribbean,
right? And so the vision initially was, and this is how I remember it. He might say it's different, but how I remember it was, how do we translate two ways? How do we translate our culture to Americans so we can get that audience, and then how do we translate the Caribbean American experience back home, right? So if we could do that, then we're able to kind of. So for example, you take the VMAs, right? Now you have a platform that's already sort of massive in mainstream culture. It has all these components that we could tap into and borrow from. So I'm like, during the VMAs, a programming for Tempo should be, how does Sean Paul see the VMAs, right? Like what's his point of view, right? How does Kevin Little, being a new artist of the year, how does he experience what the VMAs look like, right? Can we take the VMAs to the Caribbean after party instead of just doing the regular mainstream party, right? Like it was those kinds of stories. How do we tell stories about the genres of music, right? And so it was that kind of thinking. And then I think we got over the hurdle of convincing a very stringent business only white dominant company that there was a way to do it, right? And a lot of this part of convincing them, I want to give credit to Frederick, because Frederick was relentless. Like he was kicking down the doors, like, yo, y'all got to see it, you know. And then you had a group of people that worked on the project as a passion project. So you had VPs of different departments running regular mainstream, the head of programming, right? The head of this. I was the head of music marketing. And we volunteered our time to come together, meet like it was a real project, like that was funded, and it wasn't funded. We would pay for resources to help this thing. And I believe once we got greenlit, the realities of the business, I think, put us such a burden on the vision that I don't think we were able to sustain that. Now, right around the time that we got greenlit, I left. I was like, all right, y'all are good. My next mission I was really fighting to set up a touring business for MTV. So I couldn't really focus on both.
Yes.
Yeah.
And at that time, I felt like my philosophy on where I wanted the channel to go wasn't in lockstep with what Frederick and them wanted. So I was just like, it's all good. I wanted to win, but I need to be over here.
So you left at that point.
Right. So I left. And then, but like my brother at one point was like a line producer for the network. Like he worked in a bunch of shows. The guy that I had brought in, John Gill, who was from MTV Radio initially, we were going to form a Tempo radio network because radio was so important to our culture. Radio needed to be part of the mix, but John ended up taking over programming. And I think if you did not understand the nuances of how to program, that philosophy I told you guys about, that two-way translation, it could be a mess, right? And then so they were struggling with that. And then the biggest part of it from a business point of view, and I think Frederick can probably offer a lot more insight because he was on the ground dealing with it. I think MTV's support of it waned, right? I think initially it was like, yo, y'all make it work. Here is the money that you're getting from your licensing fees, your 500,000 homes. Let that be the revenue that you're generating, make that work, and then show us the viability of it. And then, right, I think it was that type of thinking. And I think Frederick and them try to do that. But what made it viable as a business was that you were getting all this extra support from the mothership, right? So I didn't need a full production management team because technically I could tap into one that was already existing that could come off the books. I don't need a sales team to go sell ad sales because we could leverage that sales team that was already selling for the mothership. We could take that cost off the books, right? Like that type of thing was supposed to happen. So the operations of a network, if it's, let's say it's $5 million a year, by leveraging other departments that existed already, you could bring it down to 2 million a year, right? So it makes it a much better business. And I think once that support went away from MTV, you lost that. So now you're operating like a real
company. Yeah,
you got to pay for all those things. So the economic structure changed and the strategy changed. And again, to be fair, I was looking at it from the outside at that point.
Yeah, as I said, you had left at that point, but I think there's something to be said because that case study kind of also suggests the difficulty of Caribbean, let's just use that word, Caribbean businesses, which would include artists or businesses themselves, to break into the American market. Because when the mothership, as you said, says, well, make this on your own and we are pulling out or whatever funding, you realize how high that mountain is, how steep that curve is. And it's a very, very steep curve for artists to break. I just wanted to throw my one last case study, which is the recent Shenseea album, right? She had a number of songs, and then one popularly controversial song with the sampling of work by thing, and that conversation, as well as the video. The nature of the video was very, how can I say, risque. Let's just use that word, right? But in terms of your analysis, so admittedly you're not working for the label, you're the head of 300 Studios. But as a Caribbean person living in America, how do you see that album? Is it a success? Is it not a success? And this is not throwing light or shade or Shenseea or her label or the producer. But I thought that was an album that could have broke bigger. That's just my opinion. And I'm not sure if I saw that, or am I missing something?
The strategy, more looking at the strategy of because I think there was so much high hopes pinned on her debut album, and the strategy of going straying a little bit away from dancehall and the freestyling that she was, that she was known for.
Right.
The strategy seemed a little questionable. But let us know what you thought about the strategy.
Yeah, so like you guys, anytime one of us get a shot to play in a bigger playground, we're all proud and we all have expectations, right? I think the mainstream, quote unquote, mainstream music playground is complicated. It's complicated even for mainstream artists, right? Mm-hmm. So it's going to be doubly complicated for an artist that's not really organically from that space. Mm-hmm. And so the first thing that I thought when she got the deal, when I learned about it, I was excited because I felt like she could translate, right? She's paid all the dues, right? She is strong. She's a strong lyricist, songwriter. Like she was seasoned. Like it wasn't some new artist that had a fluke. And right, like she was ready, right? Her team did a great job of grooming her and getting her ready. I think the part that's complicated that most Caribbean people don't get, whether you're here or in the Caribbean, is that once you get to that gateway of like, now I'm signed, now you got to navigate that major label. That is tricky. That is the hardest thing to do, right? It's almost like I liken it to a player that is great at football, right? And they're mashing up all the local tournaments. Now they get signed by a European team. The realities of being signed to a European team is completely different from you playing in these local leagues. It's completely different. So that's what happens at the record company, right? So now when I listened to some of the songs, and I didn't hear the whole album, I was like just kind of going back and forth and listening to like a few. I felt like one, creatively, they didn't take advantage of the uniqueness of who she is, right? And then there's a way to take advantage of that in terms of how you A&R the record, because Sincere, like the records on this album, she's obviously capable of doing that type of record, but she's capable of doing a wide variety of sounds. I think she's that versatile. The problem is who had the vision for what story I'm trying to tell the audience, right? Like, how do I paint this picture and it's not just based on one album, right? The idea these days of having one album that's going to be so successful, my career is going to be set is bull, right? Pardon my language. Right? You have, like, I'll give you an example. Like at 300, when they're working an artist, they're working at artists over years. Right? They're putting on mixtapes and singles, and they're painstakingly growing the audience, and they're making sure the artist is on the right tour and have the right looks. And every time the album is up or a release is up, they're paying attention to what story are we telling, right? Like, are we really capturing the hearts and minds of the fans and the particular fans that you want? We don't have the luxury of that, right? Like when she's signed, it's almost like, okay, go win. What do you mean go win? Yes. Like right? Like what should have happened, I think, for her was they should have been a longer rollout, right? I want a couple of singles. I want 3 singles.
Hit singles.
Features. I want some features on some big records, right? Some big artists, right? Let me seed you properly, right? Then I'm gonna drop an EP. I'm not dropping an album. I'm gonna drop an EP, right? That should take that whole process should run me about a year, right? And while I'm doing that, I'm developing her look. I'm getting the research, developing sort of what image I want. Like I'm kind of understanding what the audience want and where she connects her uniqueness. Right now, how do I get the Caribbean folks that she clearly has? How do I translate them over to the mainstream? Get them listening to her on Spotify and listening to her on Pandora. That exercise was not done. So I feel like the rollout was just way too quick. You never primed the market. You never got the mainstream audience to pay attention to what she's doing. Meanwhile, the Caribbean fans that she has is like, yeah, we at the pinnacle. We won. And when they listen to the music, they're like, wait, that's not
what happened.
What happened there?
That's so funny. This reminds me of there's an artist in Trinidad called Analyse Prime, who is really, really good, very unique, blends calypso and alternative music and pop and
Tracy Chapman meets.
Wow. She's like a Tracy Chapman-esque.
Meets somebody, call a local Caribbean artist.
Kind of meets Taylor Swift kind of artist. Very, very, very unique. And she was actually signed to a label in the States. And she told me that they wanted her to actually be like Taylor Swift once she was signed. They expected that kind of music, but she walked away. Right. Because she didn't feel comfortable. Right. She felt that they didn't know what to do with her. They probably what they wanted was not who she was. So she chose to just walk away from that and just, continue to focus on her craft and doing her thing independently.
Yeah. So to me, part of the issue is what I've learned from being around like a lot of established artists and artists that are sort of, they have these mature businesses, is that they are very sure about who they are, right? Mm-hmm. They've gone through enough of the journey to know who they are and can advocate for it, right? Mm-hmm. They can say, like, for example, this young lady, I'm assuming, is probably a younger artist.
Yes, she is.
Yes, she is.
Right. Yeah. And the situation probably just didn't feel good to her soul. I get that, right? But if they had a vision going in before she was signed, and this goes back to Cynthia as well. If you had a vision for this artist going in the door, right, chances are that conversation would have happened before I even sign you, right? So now if you're saying this is what I'm doing, and I understand label, what you need, the type of product you need to make your machine work and be effective, maybe I can meet you halfway. There's this whole negotiation that has to happen. But if I just walk in the door and say, yo, here I am, sign me, I'm ready, let's go, that's a recipe for failure. Like, there's no way it's going to work. My radio team can't work you because they don't know which radio station is going to back you. You don't have a real profile on your audience makeup. What are the segments that cares about you? Do you have any stories, any supporting stories, right? Are brands messing with you? Like, all these things matter. And if you don't have that plan walking in the door, there's no way one album is going to solve that. So for Cynthia, I'm hoping she got signed by somebody that believes in her long term, that's going to say, all right, back to the drawing board. Let's start seeding the market.
Yeah.
Start making sure that you're taking care, because she could do it. Like, I know she could. She's amazing. She has the look, the sound, everything. Yeah. Like, she can do it. They just have to do it the right way.
And you were right. You're right. Their strategy to build her, because they started with Jamaica. Then they started with Caribbean. She did a few soca collaborations. She built her name throughout the Caribbean. And then they decided, okay, now we can take you international. So they had a clear strategy.
But it was too fast. Like, so she did a good job of the Caribbean grassroots market, right? Yes. Now you need that grassroots market in the States, right? So you have to still do a building, because there's Caribbean people that don't really know who she is.
Yeah.
Right. Wow. Like, that's kind of like, oh yeah, I'm familiar. Like, really? But what song am I listening to? And when you play the song, they might be like, oh, that's the girl that did the Nyla Blackman thing with the blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Right? Like, she still wasn't like, when Shaggy and Sean Paul broke out, right? Well, there are two different scenarios. When Sean Paul broke out, the record was at such a fervor, right? It was a single. It was no album. It was a single. Right? It was at such a fervor that now I could work at the radio. I could do all these things. Now I could backpedal and tell the story, right? But now Sean is like figuring out, he's working with Busta Rhymes and all these. There's a quick strategy for introducing and getting you to the marketplace where the marketplace can adopt you. None of that happened with her. It was just an album, right? Which on the mainstream side, not on the Caribbean side. So I still felt like there was more work to do on the grassroots Caribbean, US-based market. Then you jump up to sort of that hip hop urban market, right? And then you're like, okay, now it's time to go sort of pop and rhythmic. Because what they did was they just jumped from Caribbean to rhythmic.
To pop.
That's hard.
And you're right with the grassroots, because you sort of have to know Afrobeats. It was a lot of the clubs and the African communities building, hyping this music up and building it up till everybody started to pay attention.
I still want to suggest that numbers are important to this thing. I mean, we talk about our kind of popularity profile, number of followers, likes, streams, that kind of thing. And if the assumption is that Caribbean people are the first ones to support you, certainly in Trinidad, for Trinidad artists, our numbers are too small. Right? 1 million people, and probably only half of them listening, less than 10% actually paying for Spotify subscriptions. We're talking about very small numbers. The Caribbean, the Trinidad diaspora, we found out during the COVID, we have at least nearly 500,000 Trinidad passports living in the United States. So we have about 500,000 or less, not fully. So the numbers aren't that large. Whereas with reggaeton, we're talking about the whole of South America, Central America, and Mexico. Right? They all speak the same language, right? So that we have a numbers game that we have to play. I hear what you're saying. We have to have a certain amount of compromise in terms of how we negotiate with the label and what audiences expect. We certainly have to have time on our side. We can't become stars. I remember, if I'm correct, Umbrella was on Rihanna's third album. It was on her first or second. It was on her third album, and that's when she broke. Right? She sang pop songs before she was able to do mandang and work and all that kind of thing. But and trust me, I in Trinidad, I love Rihanna. That's my girl, right? And she's a Bajan.
Who's Guyanese, by the way?
Huh?
As a Guyanese, I'm just gonna controversially say that Rihanna is Guyanese. Holla at me if you want to debate.
You heard it first. Nolan Baynes.
I'm claiming Bad Gallery. I'm claiming it.
As somebody with Bajan roots, I would say she's Guyanese Bajan. Okay.
There you go. I like it.
You heard it first, all right? But as it stands, I just want to thank you. I just want to kind of wrap up as we kind of come into the close of our conversation here to acknowledge that your insight in terms of what we need in the Caribbean is clear. Structure is one of those things that we don't have. Business structures, infrastructure as it was. We certainly are trying to rush the gun in terms of time and compromise. Let me ask you just one last controversial question. Should we change our accents? Should we temper down the way we speak? Is that necessary to break into the American market? Should Shenseea adopt a slightly less Jamaican accent, or coffee? I'm just curious. That's my last controversial question.
I don't think it's controversial. I think it's a real question, a real business dilemma, right? I think it varies. I think we have to be chameleons. I think we have to be versatile.
Because Rihanna still has a Bajan accent, and
true. But her songs are pop
songs. Yeah.
So let me play devil's advocate here, because I hear people saying this, even in terms of our lyrics and stuff. The Africans ain't changing their accent for us. And we don't even know half of what they're singing in these songs, and we're singing it with them. What is, everybody's singing a Walla Bamba. I don't know what that means. They ain't changing nothing.
So, all right.
So why should we?
So here's the thing. I
don't numbers
think
game.
Right. I definitely think it's a numbers game. But I think let's start with sort of the human connectivity factor first, right? If you speak similar to me, I am more likely to be attracted to you, right? I'm going to want to have a conversation with you. If you understand my terminologies and my accent, those things, right? It makes me more alluring to you. Music is no different. The way we write songs, the way we pronounce songs, whatever. I think we have to be more creative in how we relate to other people, right? The music that we present to other people. To your point, I don't think we have to change anything really, but I think we have to be more creative with the music that we present. We also have to be realistic about what people will digest versus what they won't digest. I always use the 2/3 formula in my head. This is not a scientific thing, but to me, if 2/3 of the song, whether the beat, the artist, or the lyrics and the song itself, the delivery of the song, if any two of those things connect with me, chances are in my head, it's going to be a hit record. Afrobeat has done a really good job of two of those things connecting. The beat is always African, so we always in it, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
The hooks, even though the verses might be like, oh, I'm saying this, whatever, the hooks are always simple and catchy, and I could follow. Shaggy used that same formula, right? Like there's American people that know It Wasn't Me.
Yes.
They know bombastic. They know, right? They know
Carolina.
Right. They know, but they don't know what Shaggy's saying. Like, you know what I mean?
That's true.
That's quite true. Yeah.
That's
right,
true.
You know what I mean?
Or Sean Paul,
Sean Paul gave me the light. People didn't. I heard Americans saying, "What is he saying?"
Right, exactly. Like a lot of them probably didn't realize that he's talking about weed, right? Like, life. Okay, maybe looking for enlightenment. Right? So I believe we have to be strategic and smart and realistic about what we're doing, right? Like we're selling a foreign object to foreign because that's where the money is. How do we cultivate that property, right? And I always ask, if I did the opposite, right? Like if I wanted to sell my music, let's say I'm American, I want to sell hip hop, hardcore Brooklyn or maybe Atlanta hip hop to Trinidad. If I sell it in the form that it is right now, Trinidad gonna be like, what kind of stupidness is this? What is this? Right?
I have news for you, Nolan. I have news for you.
No.
We assimilate very easily, but continue. Sorry.
No, hear me out. But I'm saying, if I took Little This and Baby This and whoever the rapper is, and I put them with Prince Swami or whatever that artist is in Trinidad that's really popular, and I make them do a collab, Trinidad is gonna pay attention faster to that record than they would take the time to digest. And if I'm on BET and I'm on the audio,
that's true.
Of course, you're gonna pay attention to me. So all I'm saying to you is, one, I think our Caribbean culture and our accent and the way we talk and our swag is our secret sauce. But it's that poetic license of how do I present that to you is in question, right? Like different artists have different ways of doing it. Shaggy to this day will say that when you listen to his music, there is a sensibility, a pop sensibility, right? He told a story about being on tour with Maxi Priest, and they were in this big morning show in London or something. I can't remember the market, but he was like, when the guy asked him, and you know, Shaggy grew part of his childhood was in Brooklyn, so he have an American accent. He could switch back and forth. And the guy was like, yo, you know, tell me a little bit about the song, whatever. And Shaggy said his first inclination was because he was trained like a dancehall artist, which would be like, yeah, man, well, I don't know, so we create the music. and he said, Maxi was like, yo, kind of. Right? Maxi started laughing, like, oh, my boy is mad excited, but here's how we did the album and da-da-da. And then afterwards, Shaggy was like, I was upset. So I went to Maxi and was like, Brethren, y'all try shut me down from, right? And he was like, no, he's like, we're in a different marketplace. We're just talking the language of the
marketplace
in that market. That makes you more valuable. It doesn't make you less valuable. So I think we personalize and internalize that notion of we have to dummy down what we're saying, or we have to, you know, mask who we are. That's not the case. I think it's strategic on our part that we can kind of assimilate into their culture, get them to buy into our thing. And then once you fall in love with Laura, the big time artist, now I want to know everything about her. So I'm going to go listen to the hardcore stuff. I'm going to go listen to the stuff you did with the acoustic guitar. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We just don't give it that shot. It's almost like once I meet you, you love me or you hate me. If you hate me, I don't want nothing to do with you. Cool with it. No, it's like a long-term process of how we win new audiences, right? Yeah. And I just think we have to have the patience. I don't think we should shy away from who we are, because who we are is amazing, right? Like everybody trying to speak like Caribbean folks.
Well, they're trying to speak like Jamaicans.
and sometimes they speak like Trini, and other people don't realize that they're speaking like Trini, right?
Yeah, because everybody thinks we're all from one country. Nolan,
Jamaica's synonymous with the culture.
Yeah, Nolan, this has been sorry. Continue. Continue.
No. I was finish the sentence. The last point I was trying to make is that we just have to be very sophisticated about what the strategy is for growing our music, right? Like, and we have to consider that you need a strategy. We know what the goal is. We want the whole world to sing our songs, but we got to figure out what that strategy is. And we have to become students of how the industry works, right? And then be okay with evolution, right? Like be okay with knowing that we're not a homogeneous people. Like our music won't stay the same and people won't digest it the same. So it's okay for us to have many verticals of what our music really is, right? Alternative to hardcore dancehall, to soca, to whatever, and everything in between mixed up. Be okay with that. And then if we put that structure against it, right, there's no way that we could fail. There's smaller markets of people that are bust out because there's concentration in how they do it. And the numbers matter, even if it's 1 million people. That's 1 million streams. That's noticeable, right? Like, so we just have to really be strategic about that.
From your lips to God's ears. Nolan,
excellent.
This has been fabulous.
Thank you so much, guys.
Wonderful. And thank you very much for your time. And Laura, if you want to say goodbye, we have a couple of minutes to say that.
I mean, I could listen to you all night, Nolan. I mean, this is very stimulating conversation. Thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to seeing whatever projects you do with the Caribbean in mind.
I appreciate it.
Sure.
I appreciate it.
And you know, anything you want to know, I know you know some artists and stuff, and anything you need to know, just feel free to hit us up, you know?
I apprete that. And I will actually. I will.
We're available to talk
about some of the stuff that we're working on.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And if 300 Studios could do some stories on Caribbean artists, soca artists,
listen, there's some stuff in the works already.
Wonderful.
But when the time is right, I'll be able to tell you guys first.
Oh, Nigel, listen. I could have talked to Nolan whole night.
I said it before and I say it again after. One of the best interviews we've had here on Music Matters, the Caribbean edition.
I feel we'd have to bring him back.
Not a problem, because it gets to the nitty-gritty of what we're about. It kind of exposes the harsh realities of what works and what doesn't work. And I think it's a kind of important first step in developing a kind of music industry, and certainly our part as podcasters, and hopefully our listeners will get to understand. This ain't a joke. This is a business. It's a serious business. It's about dollars and cents. And Nolan laid on the line for us. So thank you, Nolan, for that. And one of the best interviews. And hopefully we continue in these kind of really in-depth interviews where we could get the brass tacks and no holds barred, and we ain't putting you all over anybody's eye, and it had to be rough.
And get the experts who work internationally, who are in the business, who know the business, who know what it takes to make it in business.
Correct.
Come and share their gems with us.
Definitely. So that's it for this evening's podcast, and hopefully I'll see you all again. Of course, you know the whole routine. We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, Music Matters Caribbean. We're also on YouTube, right? So and Twitter. So that Music CRBN on Twitter and Music Matters Caribbean, so that you can hear us. You can actually see on our podcast. We can see the audio waves.
Yes, but leave some suggestions, leave some feedback for us. Let us know what you think about the episodes. Let us know your favorite episodes. Give us your opinion on what the music industry in the Caribbean needs.
There you go. So that's it for this evening. I am Nigel Campbell.
I am Laura Dorridge-Phillips, and you've been listening to Music Matters,
the Caribbean edition. Bye.
Bye.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for listening to Music Matters, the Caribbean edition. If you enjoyed the podcast, please like, subscribe, and follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Music Matters Caribbean. And if you want to listen to our previous podcasts and keep up with our new material, check out the website podcast.iradio.tt, or listen and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Radio Public, and more of your favorite podcast platforms.